Welcome to Legal Nurse Podcast. I'm Pat Iyer, and this is our 9th year of producing shows for legal nurse consultants that are heard all around the world. I'm delighted that you're with us today for this session and for all of the future sessions that we have for this show. Coming up in our next LNC Success online conference, taking place February 27, 28, and March 1, 2025, you will have an opportunity to get support, to get knowledge, to have networking experiences, and to refresh your business. We're going to focus on a lot of foundational content to help you move forward in your business, get more clients, make more money, and avoid expensive mistakes. You can sign up for that conference at lnc.tips/February 2025 virtual. I would love to see you there. Now, let's get on to the show. This is our power session on powerful presentations. I'll start off, and then I'll introduce Barbara as she takes over for me. First and foremost, why is this an important topic for you as a legal nurse consultant? What are the benefits to you of giving presentations to attorneys? This may seem like a self-evident question. However, I think it's important for us to focus on what you get out of this. And that is that you get an opportunity to show your expertise to an attorney group when you're standing in front of them. They are listening to you. They are evaluating you. They are seeing, can you put your thoughts together coherently? Can you speak to them in a language that they understand? You're showing them that you know what they need and that you are the right resource for them. Attorneys like to meet people who they're going to be working with. They like to meet you when you're an exhibitor at a conference. They like to meet you if they invite you to come to their law firm. They're not as enthusiastic, by the way, about meeting you if you knock on their door of their law firm without an appointment and expect them to stop what they're doing to meet with you. Those cold call visits have very much fallen out of favor and effectiveness. When you present yourself as an experienced speaker, you're standing out in a crowded field. Many of my attorney clients tell me now they are getting unsolicited emails and letters on almost a daily basis from legal nurse consultants. They would prefer to pick the time and the date when they would interact with you as a legal nurse consultant. When you're standing in front of a room or you're teaching in a webinar format, you're their expert, their trusted source of knowledge by virtue of the fact that you were considered to be valuable enough to be invited to be part of a program of that nature. This keeps you top of mind with attorneys, a phrase that many marketers use all the time. Sometimes they abbreviate it as TOM. Top of mind means when I've got a case, I want to think about Kathy Golden helping me or Jane Shufro because I heard them speak to my law firm or at a conference or on a webinar. I know that they've got the skills that I need. I know that Jane's got perioperative experience and post-anesthesia care unit experience. And I've got a case in which I need to have an expert from the operative area, as an example. Or I'll turn to Jane and say, Jane, can you help me find somebody? The types of presentations that broadly we're talking about in this session are one-on-one client meetings, when an attorney invites you to come in to talk about your services. These concepts apply if you go to a law firm and you offer to bring them food for a lunch and learn, and people are sitting in a conference room listening to you while they're eating. If you're invited to be part of a webinar, or an in-person or virtual conference, or if you're making a sales presentation, which could be very similar to a one-on-one, except that the attorney might invite you in to say, I want to interview you to consider whether I should give you cases. That's the agenda in the back of their mind. I got involved in legal nurse consulting as a result of going to a conference in 1987 on career alternatives for nurses. There was a woman named Clarissa Russo, who was from California, who was teaching a program in New Jersey. It was a one-day event, and she talked about nurses as expert witnesses, nurses doing case management review, risk management, some of the non-traditional, I'll put that in quote marks, roles of nurses. I had no idea nurses went into the courtroom to testify. I knew there were medical malpractice trials and cases, but I had no idea how to get my foot in the door and start that process. So I came back, spoke to the risk manager of the hospital where I was working as a nursing quality assurance coordinator, and said to him, how do I find attorneys? He explained to me about Martindale-Hubbell, which at that time was a whole series of printed books that sat on the shelves in the courthouse library, 20 minutes from where I lived. Martindale-Hubbell is now martindale.com, 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 a website that is now up to date. The minute those printed books were put on the shelf, they were already out of date because attorneys move around. And I approached some attorneys using Martindale as a way to look up their contact information, and also the New Jersey Jury Verdict Review and Analysis, which was a printed publication at that time that gave me the names of the attorneys who were handling malpractice cases. I sent out letters. I started getting cases. And then as I became known as a trusted resource, as a med-surg expert witness, and a behind-the-scenes consultant, some of my clients started asking me to give presentations at conferences. I also found out that our local New Jersey Bar Association was very active, and they looked for speakers with medical background. One presentation that I gave for the New Jersey Trial Lawyers Group, which is now the Association for Justice, resulted in me getting about $250,000 worth of work. And that was a 10-minute demo that I did with my client to show how, as an expert fact witness, I helped tell the story of his client, a woman who diminished the severity of her injuries, minimized them. You know, the stoic people like me who don't show feelings and emotions, and it's okay, I'm managing. I went through her medical records, brought out her story, and there were a line of attorneys waiting for me to step down from the stage. I now work with attorneys and do some coaching with legal nurse consultants who are building their business. I shared in this book, which is Powerful LNC Presentations, some of the concepts of what we're covering in this presentation today. First of all, I want to focus on now transitioning over to identifying how you get started in terms of doing presentations. Time will not permit us to go into great detail on this topic. We're going to give you a more of an overview to make sure that you understand the principles and how to apply them. First, you got to know who's your ideal audience. Do you want to work with primarily plaintiff attorneys, primarily defense attorneys, product liability attorneys, attorneys handling criminal cases? You need to know your audience. And then know what events your audience attends in your state. That helps you find out the organizations of trial lawyers and to look at their programs to determine if they indeed provide presentations to their membership that include medical topics. Your existing clients can bring you in and give you an opportunity. Barbara has a chance to speak to the New Jersey Association for Justice in April in Atlantic City. This is one of the largest in-person attorney conferences in the entire country. The folks in California might be a little bit larger. However, the New Jersey group is at least first, if not second place. And it draws from a very heavily populated area. It encompasses attorneys from New Jersey, from New York, from Pennsylvania. Barbara and her client will be giving a presentation. Barbara was invited by her client to get on the agenda. The trial lawyers groups are active in education and they want speakers with expertise. If you don't have clients or your clients are not connected with people planning programs, you can contact the legal education organizers directly. I got to the point when I was running my business full-time in New Jersey, which I no longer do, of the Bar Association calling me and saying, Pat, we've got a program coming up in 6 months. We want you on a panel discussion, or we want you to give a presentation. That's a wonderful thing when they reach out to you directly because they know that you can provide valuable education. I'm curious if you could put in the chat whether you have ever given a presentation of the kind that we're talking about, either a lunch and learn at a law firm or a presentation to attorneys at a webinar or a conference. So put in the chat, lunch and learn or webinar or conference, if the answer is yes, if you've done any of those. And I see some responses. A conference, I have not yet. Ready, interested. This is a golden opportunity for you to get in front of attorneys, and I encourage you to pursue these opportunities. Barbara will share in a little bit how we are doing a conference coming up at the end of this month, and we're devoting 2 hours and 10 minutes to specifically this topic of structuring an educational opportunity, finding them, and coming up with topics that are going to resonate with your audience. A simple, repeatable plan is first, know your audience, who you want to reach. Make sure that you're clear on your expectations. You understand what the event organizer wants, what topics they want covered, how long you have, the logistics, if you're going to be teaching by Zoom, for example. Much of the continuing education has moved online, but there are still in-person events and multi-day conferences being offered in your local state. And then you start with a compelling hook. Bring them into the topic. Tell them a story. Get them involved, get them engaged. The hook that I used in that 10-minute presentation with my client was to read a little bit of the deposition testimony in which this woman who was hit by a bus after gambling all day in Atlantic City, I pulled out key passages of her depositions and I put a scarf over my head to act in the role of this elderly woman. And then my attorney and I read just a few passages to explain what she said. How has this event changed your life? She says, not much. And he's meanwhile in the room going, oh God, why can't she talk about all the things that are different? And then at the end of reading that passage, I said, my client turned to me and said, Pat, we have a problem. And everybody in the room laughed. That was the hook. We brought them in to the topic of using a nurse to explain the medical records as an expert fact witness. And the hook was to tell the story and enact the small piece of her deposition. In terms of engagement, people love opportunities to put things in the chat, raise their hand, answer questions, turn to their neighbor. You've been in conferences when speakers have used this. Now turn to your neighbor and share one thing about you that many people don't know, just as an example. When I've taught for the Bar Association in New Jersey, one time I said, turn to your neighbor, Mr. Attorney, Mrs. Attorney, and talk about your frustrations with medical records. And then once they did that, I could then build the rest of my talk by referring to the answers that they gave. What is your biggest frustration with medical records? Missing records, not knowing if we've got everything, illegible records. I built on their answers directly from that interactive exercise. And then as you close, you're summarizing the key points and the takeaways. You're pulling it together for the attorney. You provide some actionable steps, things that they can apply and use immediately. And if you are permitted, you make a clear announcement of, this is my email address if you've got more questions. What attorneys do not want you to do, and this is in all caps, bold, emphasized, underlined, is they don't want you to give a talk in which you spend the entire time selling your services. Here's why you should hire me. This is what I can do for you. They want you, through your expertise, to demonstrate to their audience your knowledge. But the surest way to never be asked back is to violate the no selling rule. You can have, very typically, your email address on your slides. You can have conference materials with your email address or website, but you cannot stand there and say, hire me, hire me, hire me, hire me. Did you know you could hire me? I can help you. That violates the culture of teaching attorneys. So with that, and I think I've made my point, Barbara, I think I've gotten through on that one. I'd like to introduce Barbara Levin, my co-presenter, who is my colleague, my friend, my conference planner, my co-author, was on the board of Legal Nurse Consultants, Association of Legal Nurse Consulting, with me for 5 years, another past president of the association. And she will carry us further now into the topic of structuring your talk.
Thank you, Pat. And while we're transitioning over, I want those who do not know who you are, Pat, to know a little bit more about you, aside from the beautiful presentation that you've given thus far. As you heard, Pat and I served on the National Board of Directors for the American Association of Legal Nurse Consulting. She has her LNCC, which is the Legal Nurse Consultant Certified Certification. She has her master's in nursing, and she had a very highly successful independent legal nursing company, which she actually sold. It was in Flemington, New Jersey, and she sold that. She formed that company in 1989, and she testified as an expert witness for approximately 25 years, medical liability for medical surgical cases. And she grew her company so large that when she sold it, it was worth multi-million dollars. And she's now a business coach, as you know, for membership programs for you who are beginner legal nurse consultants, those who you are considering legal nurse consulting, and those that are even the most experienced legal nurse consultant. She has knowledge beyond anyone that I know, and she is the only legal nurse consultant that I'm aware of that her reputation and knowledge and expertise has gone international. And she also has a very successful podcast that has been listened to in how many how many countries, Pat? There are so many.
105.
105 countries. And she is quite a prolific author. She has been published she's written more than 70 books, numerous articles. She and I have collaborated together on a few of them. And she is really the go-to person when it comes to legal nurse consulting. So I'm so excited that all of you are joining us here today. And I will continue chatting with you about presentations and tips that include being clear and avoiding medical jargon when you are presenting to attorneys. So you need to keep it simple and clear. Attorneys are prioritizing their cases. They take a look at cases. Some cases are maybe relatively simple, but you never know. You have to expect the unexpected too. Sometimes new evidence pops up. And there are cases that are very complex. So our role as legal nurse consultants is to help explain the medical issues and to try to keep it simple. Try to avoid overwhelming your attorneys with excess details. So focus on clear, concise message and summarize your key points into one sentence before you begin. So when you are defining your core message, your attorneys, when they're listening to you, should walk away with a single memorable takeaway from your presentation. Think about it. What is your core message? Write that down on your notes right now, because that's something for you to think about before you walk into an attorney luncheon or a conference. What is the message you want to deliver? And what is going to be most useful to this group? Remember, you have to think about who is your target audience? What type of attorneys are there? Are these personal injury attorneys? Are these medical malpractice attorneys? Are these family law attorneys? Are these attorneys perhaps involved in trust and estates? And some of you may wonder, well, what would my role be in working with an attorney that does trust and estates? Well, I have been asked on several occasions to assist attorneys when reviewing a few wills, and the changes, last minute changes to the wills and how an individual may have changed who the family member was that they were leaving their estate to. So perhaps beforehand it was to the family, and then there was one situation of an outsider who came in, became very friendly with the individual, and the person passed away, but just prior to the death, signed the papers leaving the entire estate to that individual. So after reviewing the medical records, I found that individual had actually been under the influence of multiple pain medications. And there was documentation within the medical records showing that this individual was hallucinating as well. So just an example of thinking outside of the box of how we can assist those attorneys. So when we're talking about your core message, avoid medical jargon and complex explanations. You want medical terms in plain language that attorneys that they can quickly grasp onto. So think about the functional impact. And I want to give you an example. But before I give you the example, I want you to think like an attorney when you're presenting to them, because they are the ones who are presenting to a jury. And if things are too complex for the jury, then they're going to lose the jury. And the outcome can be something undesirable from what your client wants. So I'm going to give you an example, and I want all of you to write in the chat. So this is an example, and tell me if this is clear or how you would change things. Mr. Smith is a 42-year-old trauma patient who died of a pulmonary embolism. It was noted that he was wearing SCDs and took anticoagulation during his admission, had a double lumen PICC line, and was discharged without anticoagulation. The family felt the nursing staff was not attentive, and he got his meals late into the evening. He was on long-term antibiotics because he had had an open fracture, which required several surgeries for repair. Can you tell me, is that clear? I guess that would be the first question. Is that a clear message? Not clear. Too complex, too much medical jargon. Exactly. All right. So I'm going to ask you, what would you clarify with regard to the medical jargon in there?
Are you interested in getting more clients? Are you interested in building your business? Are you interested in knowing how to manage your business so that you can present yourself in the most attractive light? Are you interested in attracting new attorney clients who are drawn to you because of the knowledge that you possess? All of those goals help you build your business, and all of those interests are ones that we address in our next online conference, taking place February 27, 28, and March 1st, 2025. You'll find all the information that you need about this conference at the link lnc.tips/February 2025 virtual.
What would you clarify for the medical jargon? Would you clarify SCDs? Would you clarify pulmonary embolism? Would you clarify the double lumen PIC? Say blood thinners instead of anticoagulants is a suggestion, yes. Must have knowledge that complex fracture increased risk of PE, yes. Explain the abbreviation. Somebody said everything. Simple diagnosis and treatments, yes. I agree with all of those. And let me ask you, in that one, the example that I gave you, what was the takeaway message? Okay. The takeaway message, I think, in the first one, yes, it got lost. It's unknown. I don't know. Absolutely. So if this were your case that you were giving a presentation to a client, what should the take-home message be in this case? I'll just wait a moment, see if anybody's going to respond. He ultimately suffered a lung clot. Yes. Thank you, Denise. Was patient a candidate for blood thinners at home? Focus on the missing pieces. Absolutely. So instead of all of that, which I had gone through, a better example would be that Mr. Smith was a 42-year-old trauma patient who died from a pulmonary embolism, a blood clot in the lungs, 4 days after his hospital discharge. During his hospital stay, I would explain how he used sequential compression devices and how those help prevent blood clots by promoting circulation, how he received blood thinners to help prevent blood clots. I would discuss the double lumen PIC line, which is the special catheter to deliver the long-term antibiotics that he's requiring because he had an open fracture. And the beauty of having this catheter, the PIC line, is it allows for extended use and makes it easier to administer those intravenous antibiotics, and the patient can be treated with long-term antibiotic use at home. In addition, I would talk about that he was discharged without blood thinners. And that is the big key here, that he received anticoagulation in the hospital and was sent home without blood thinners, and he was a high risk for developing pulmonary emboli. I would then continue and explain the different factors having to go into putting somebody at high risk for developing DVT and PE. And with this discussion, would explain what are the standards of care in nursing when providing care and treatment to a trauma patient, and the role of the clinical nurse at the time of the discharge. So that's an example for you. I want you, before your presentation, to research the attorney's specific needs and interests, because you want to make your talk more engaging. I suggest you use case examples relevant to their practice areas to illustrate points in the way that they understand it. And customize at least 20% of your standard presentation should include some questions and topics that they're interested in, bring them in the loop, get them engaged. And that would include, if they're medical malpractice attorneys, talking about standard of care. Discuss what types of experts they would need for this type of case as examples. When you're giving presentations, I'm sure you're aware that attorneys, they are very busy and they can be easily distracted. So you want to grab their attention immediately by addressing something relevant to them. So open up with a real world scenario, a case example, maybe a common problem that they are facing. What type of problem is that? Are you, as the legal nurses, noticing an increase in some type of case and perhaps bringing that forth to them? Are you seeing, for example, the case example that I gave you, I started seeing an uptick in patients that were discharged home without anticoagulation. So that's an example. Or another one is patients, while they're being treated in the hospital with pain medication, they have received too many pain medications in the hospital. And I'm starting to see an increase in those, that patients were not monitored in the hospital while on, for example, PCA medication, oral medication, and IV medication. And the doors were shut in the night to allow the patient to sleep. And they found the patient deceased in the morning. So I started seeing an increase in those types of cases. So these are just a couple examples for you. Keep your content structured, eliminate unnecessary details, focus on the practical and the actionable insights. By following those principles, you're going to ensure your presentations are engaging. You want them to be clear and impactful. And this is going to help make it easier for the attorneys to see the value of your expertise. So what are the P's in presenting? Preparing. You want to have an outline with key points. Avoid writing out your talk verbatim and standing there with notes reading verbatim. And I also encourage you to simplify your slides. Avoid having too many words on your slides. Pat and I have actually seen some programs that the entire slide were sentences, that the presenter was just reading the sentences across the slides. That's not the kind of presentation your attorney wants to see or hear. Structure your presentation. Include a clear introduction, body, and conclusion. Know your audience again. What type of attorneys are they? What is their specialty? Perhaps they have a specialty in criminal. And if they have that background, then you're going to want to tailor your presentation to something perhaps they're interested in, the criminal. Maybe it has to do with drug and alcohol. Maybe it has to do with injuries as a result of a trauma. Use your visuals strategically. You can incorporate charts and diagrams and images to enhance the clarity. And plan for digital settings. Ensure that your background is clear. Lighting, your microphone and your camera are all set up. Practice, practice, practice. Rehearse your topic multiple times. Work on your vocal delivery. Practice your tone and pauses. And I want you to make eye contact and engage with your audience. Avoid reading your slides, as I mentioned before, and use natural gestures. I suggest that you test your technology in advance. If you're using your microphone, make sure it works properly, and arrive to your presentation early to test these things out. Dress appropriately. Consider how your outfit, will contrast with the background behind you, but also dress professionally. Pat and I have seen a variety of presenters dress in different ways, from low-cut cleavage shirts and mini skirts and high spiked heels. I encourage you not to dress that way. Test your slides and materials. Bring backups. Oh my goodness, make sure you bring up backup material. Have a printed copy of your presentation, extra batteries, a digital backup. Have a thumb drive as well. Confirm your internet access. Don't rely solely on their Wi-Fi being available. So have the availability to have a hotspot. Anticipate potential issues. Have a contingency plan. Recently, well, actually, it was a few months ago, there was it a hurricane, Pat, that was coming through your area? And you and I were concerned about our last conference, our LNC Success conference. What would the backup plan be? And we were concerned that this hurricane was going to go right over Pat's area in Florida, and that she would lose power, electricity, and not have the ability to join the conference. So we had a full contingency plan, and thankfully, the hurricane was not directly in her area. She had some effects, and her area did not suffer from tornadoes. So by following, preparing, practicing, and previewing, you are going to enhance your professionalism, your confidence, and the impact of your presentation. And while we're talking about presentations and conferences, I want to talk to you about a conference that Pat and I are hosting, and it will be February 27, 28, March 1 this year, 2025. It's our LNC Success 11th virtual conference. We are so excited to bring this to you. Are you ready to take your legal nurse consulting practice to the next level? No matter where you are in your practice, you could be just at the beginning stages of your practice. Maybe you've been in practice for a period of time, or maybe you're the most seasoned. We invite all of you for this exclusive virtual legal nursing conference. It will help you attract attorney clients, the best kind of attorney clients, because there is a difference. You will learn, will help you grow your practice, stand out in a competitive market. What you're going to gain are proven strategies to market your expertise and land your attorney clients, tips for negotiating successful interactions with attorneys, and inside knowledge of how legal nurses can provide behind-the-scenes support. We're going to help you deep dive into medical adverse events and risk mitigation. We have an incredible lineup of industry-leading speakers, and that includes attorneys who regularly work with legal nurse consultants, so you'll hear directly from them and have the opportunity to ask questions of them. You will hear from expert legal nurses in real-world cases, advanced practice legal nurses who expanded their roles, and successful legal nurse business owners who have built thriving businesses. Pat and I are both two of the past presidents for the American Association of Legal Nurse Consultants, and this is a one-of-a-kind conference to help empower each of you to bring your practice to a new level. So I encourage you to visit our website, lnc.tips/February 2025 virtual. And our conference is February 27, 28 and March 1, and you will see the incredible lineup of speakers from attorneys, business owners, advanced practice nurses. You will hear firsthand about medical negligence cases. You'll hear the facts. What happened? What were the standards of care? You will hear, Pat, perhaps you can talk about the case that you're going to present with your attorney client, a riveting case.
I spent 3.5 years working with an attorney on a case that had so many complexities in terms of trying to understand what happened. And we're going to present that case.
Well, that's wonderful. And you will hear more about the conference towards the end. But Pat is going to talk now about some additional parts of presenting on focusing your strengths as a communicator, which she does very well.
Thank you, Barbara. I wanted to pull together a few more concepts for you in the remaining time that we have today. And that is to deal with the elephant in the room, which is that it can be anxiety provoking to stand up in front of a group of attorneys and present. We get butterflies in our stomach, which, by the way, I have to emphasize is an American phrase. If you share that with people internationally, they envision insects crawling around in your stomach. So when I say butterflies in your stomach, I'm referring to those presentation anxieties and nerves. A dirty little secret in the legal world is that attorneys get anxious also. There is a very controversial attorney by the name of Jerry Spence from Wyoming, who has a reputation as a powerful speaker and one that attorneys respect. I sat in a presentation with him in New York City when I was exhibiting in 1995. And I remember very vividly an attorney raising his hand and saying, Jerry, how do you deal with the fear that we feel when we are in the courtroom? And he gave a comprehensive answer, which I would love to be able to reproduce for you so many years later, but can't. Acknowledging that, yes, you do feel the fear and that you tackle it with preparation, with taking some deep breaths, with striking power poses. Practice breathing from your diaphragm. Recognize that you are experiencing those anxieties as you're getting ready to talk, that the audience is rooting for you. They don't want you to stand up, open your mouth, and say nothing. They're there to hear you. They are there because they acknowledge and recognize you as a person who can share meaningful information with them. But those little voices in the head that say, who are you to think that you should be standing in front of these attorneys? Or are you going to say something that's going to make a fool of you? Those voices can, first of all, not encourage you to seek out opportunities, and second, make you quite nervous beforehand. Barbara stressed in her section, preparation, preparation, preparation. It's one of the watchwords for professional speakers. The more you go over your content, the more comfortable you are with your content, and the more you can pick it up and move in a different direction if you need to. When you are fully prepared, it helps with that anxiety. When you practice deep breathing and you practice expanding your lungs, it helps with your anxieties. I'm curious if you have ever been part of a vocal group or you're part of a vocal group now. By vocal group, that could be a choir. It could be some group where you are doing singing on a routine basis. And put in the chat, yes, if you've been a member of a vocal group or are currently part of a group. And I'm seeing some answers coming in. Not since high school. Yes. I see some yeses, a few nos, some people who've done it in the past. You've probably remember your choir director or your vocal group director talking about the importance of warming up your voice. That's something that applies to professional speaking as well. Making sure that you're well hydrated, making sure that you don't eat dairy the morning of, which can cause increased mucus. If you have postnasal drip, as I do, I take a steroid inhaler every day to try to control it. And sometimes it works. Sometimes my voice fails me. When you make motorboat sounds with your lips and blow out through your lips, that helps to warm up your voice. There are many YouTube videos that you can look at on voice exercises and warming up your voice that help you before you stand in front of a microphone, whether that's in your house or in person or in a law firm. Before you open your mouth, make sure that your voice is warmed up. Also, have a power position. Make a conscious decision to relax your shoulders. We have a tendency to hunch up when we're nervous. Speakers also clasp their hands in front of them to deal with the tendency that many of us have, which is to talk with our hands and point and make gestures. I grew up in New Jersey. We have an expression in New Jersey that we can't talk unless we've got our hands in motion. And that may be the case in your state as well. However, you can distract people when you are waving your hands around, when you have pointed gestures that make sense to the audience, then your hands are effective. If you say, this is a key point, that's a different gesture when I'm holding up my index finger versus if this is a key point and you're looking at my hand waving around thinking, what is she trying to say? Also make sure, and this is something that I have learned not to do, is not to put your hand over your mouth. I have testified like this and have had attorneys doing the cross-examination to say, Nurse Iyer, would you please lower your hand? It's a comfort gesture to put your hand over your mouth, but it obscures your voice. You can use compelling statistics as you present or telling stories, as I mentioned earlier, and always avoid apologizing. I don't really know if I know enough to tell you these points. That's an apology. That's taking away your own power. Or I'm sorry, we don't have more time for questions. That's also an apology. It may be an acknowledgement, but to say, we've run out of time. I'd be happy to answer additional questions if you email me, and my email is. That's a much stronger ending than offering an apology. And remember that just because people are sitting in the room doesn't mean that they're paying attention. You have to earn their focus. I remember teaching a program to nursing home administrators who needed continuing legal education. And I wove in stories about nursing home cases that had come to my legal nurse consulting business. I might have reviewed the case, but more likely I subcontracted the case to a nursing home expert. And one administrator came in with his cup of coffee and his newspaper, and he put him down on his table, and then he started paying attention to me. He said to me afterwards, Pat, you were so interesting that I didn't get a chance to read my newspaper. He was there for the CLEs, but he got hooked by the stories. And I thought about all the speakers before me who probably stood there with watching him hold a newspaper up to his face. Of course, today he would be scrolling through his cell phone, smiling at his phone instead of reading the newspaper. You have to get their attention right away and keep their attention by telling them stories, engaging them, sharing content that is meaningful to them. And if you finish early, that's okay. You can stretch out time. You can give people a chance to ask questions. You can reiterate your points. What you should not do in the speaking world is go over, because some programs are so tightly directed, so tightly scheduled, that if you take 10 minutes beyond what you're allowed, you're robbing the next speaker of those 10 minutes. I hear this all the time when I go to National Speakers Association conferences of speakers who have had to follow somebody who didn't end on time. And now their 1 hour long presentation has to be compressed into 45 minutes. And they discuss, all right, this is what happened. Here's how you can modify your talk if that happens to you. Barbara, let's wrap it up and see what questions people might have in the chat. This is your opportunity to ask questions as we pull this together in the remaining time that we have.
Absolutely. So we'd like to ask all of you, if you'd like to write in the chat what questions you have. And while you're writing your questions, I just want to mention a little bit more about our conference. That's February 27, 28, and March 1, 2025. People are asking, well, what if I'm working those days? Is there a video? There is an opportunity. Once you go to our website, you can take a look and you can sign up for the attendance at the conference and the videos as well. There's an option for that. So a few of the topics include, there will be a hands-on workshop for everyone to learn more about marketing. So that's key, hands-on workshop. You will learn about mastering negotiation that I mentioned, navigating the challenges between the legal nurse consultant and the attorney. And that is by a very prominent, well-spoken individual, Greg Williams, who's amazing. And you'll hear the program When Lives Are Ruined in Minutes, and that's with Pat Iyer and her client. You will hear my presentation. It's called Never Snowed, Risks and Rewards of Using the PCA. So this applies to all of you who are doing behind the scenes work. You will learn about what happened in this story. You will hear about standard of care. What about expert witnessing? So all different areas there. You'll hear about preventing medical errors and risk management and quality assurance. There will be opportunities to have one-on-one sessions with Pat, and that's something so unique with our conference. And we've had many people who attend our conference just to have that opportunity alone. You will have seasoned legal nurses, attorneys, as I mentioned, business owners, advanced practice presenters there as well. And it'll be an opportunity for all of you to network with other legal nurse consultants from around the United States, although we have had a few legal nurses attend from Canada. So we always welcome everyone to our conference. We've had physicians attend in the past, as well as many others. So we'd love to have you. It's lnc.tips/February 2025 virtual. And I'm sure it's in the chat there. So let's see, what kinds of questions do you have? Let's see. Natalie has asked, is there a template of how to structure information for speaking events?
So that in the chat, Barbara, that was something that we're going to cover in the workshop. As an overview, it's making sure that you know very clearly who's in your audience and what are their problems. And you can often get that from the person who is planning the conference or webinar. They may have very specific information that they want you to cover. I will share one story about making sure you know who's in the audience. I brought in a nursing home administrator to teach with me in a nursing home program. What she did was forget that she wasn't talking to other administrators. They were all attorneys in the room. She said, when the surveyors come into your facility, they will look for. The attorneys are staring at her in puzzlement because they weren't wearing uniforms. They were attorneys. They were the ones involved in the litigation. And she completely missed the correct tone. I spoke to her afterwards. I was a little embarrassed because she was there because I recommended her and she was quite knowledgeable, but I helped her refocus. And she had another opportunity to present to attorneys, and this time she was on target, and then she got cases. So always be clear that you know, and don't make an assumption, as Barbara mentioned earlier, that attorneys understand medical terms, because you can completely lose them.
Another question is, what are the best strategies for securing your first conference presentation or lunch or learn opportunity? Oh, there's so many. There are so many strategies. I mean, networking is key. And certainly through the networking, you might get your first case. You may, by attending our conference, there will be attorneys there. We have had great success. This is our 11th LNC Success conference, and we've had attorney presenters at each of our conferences. And as a result, we've had individuals go to those presenters, go to those attorneys and talk to them about what they can do for them, talk about their background. Some of them have obtained work from those attorney speakers, and some of them have just gotten some fabulous advice and how to move forward in their area. And there's somebody here asking about additional areas for presenting. I know, Pat, you talked about, I believe you talked about your local bar associations as examples.
The local bar association, the local trial lawyers conference group are ones to research to find out specifically who's in charge of continuing legal education. Do they have medical programs coming up? Can you help them plan one? And I saw a question on dealing with introversion. And that's a key point. And I'm an introverted person, although some of you may not think I am, because I can sit in my office and feel very comfortable presenting to you, but I'm naturally a shy person. As you think about what you have to offer, you've got so much knowledge of value to attorneys. The only way that they know about it is when you put yourself out. You raise your hand and volunteer. You offer to speak. You do your research so that you've picked a topic that is going to be interesting to them. You're presenting and you're looking for cues. Are people staying attentive? Are they drifting off? It takes a while to get the skill to present effectively. And the only way you get the skill is by doing it, by putting in the time, by putting yourself into uncomfortable positions until it feels more comfortable. There's no shortcut for that.
I put in the link. It's been listed here a few times. People are asking more questions about presentations. So if you go to lnc.tips/creating series, that is a way to purchase Pat's book on presentations, and it has everything in there from A to Z on giving presentations, great examples, additional content from what we were able to provide to you today, because we only had an hour to present. And then again, our conference is around the corner, February 27, 28, and March 1. We'd love to have you join us. And if you go to lnc.tips/February 2025 virtual, and we'd love to see you.
Thank you so much for being with us today. What we wanted to emphasize for you is, as my closing thought, and Barbara may have a closing thought as well, is seek out these opportunities. Attorneys want to hear from you. They want to learn from you. You've got great knowledge. They open doors that you can't imagine when you are willing to speak to attorneys and overcome your nervousness, introversion, shyness, fear. Take advantage of it. It is a wonderful way for attorneys to get to know you.
Absolutely. we really encourage you to go outside of your comfort zone and take on this challenge for yourself. And you will feel so wonderful afterwards that you did it. So we'd love to hear feedback from you after you've given your presentations and how our program helped you. So please don't hesitate to contact us. And you have the website for the conference. I guess, Pat, should we put our emails in here if people had questions? Well, maybe if people wanted to give us their successes, we'd love to hear that. I'm just going to put mine in there.
I'm putting yours in.
Oh, you are? Okay, great.
Okay. Well, thank you for being with us. We appreciate that. And we will see you again soon.
Take care. Have a great day.
Coming up next on Legal Nurse Podcast, we're going to focus on a topic that affects us all, which is healthy eating. And I know that by the time you listen to this, holidays have come and gone, and you may be thinking, perhaps it's time to lose some weight. Chris Mew, who is a legal nurse consultant and a person who has gone through her own personal journey to change her health and her eating habits with spectacular success, I might add, is our next guest on Legal Nurse Podcast. Chris, what were some of the topics that we covered on your podcast?
Hi, Pat. Thank you for having me. We talked about healthy eating, and we talked about my personal journey, as you said, and how I related it to working on cases. Each one of us is an individual, and each case is an individual. So I kind of made a correlation between what our health and working in the law field, how we can choose better foods and help to minimize inflammation in our body and age better. We talked about how the industry has gone from choosing farm fresh foods and where we are now with convenience and processed foods and how that affects us. Also became aware of changes in the diet and how that related to my own metabolic health and wellness, and CGMs, how they're used as tools for non-diabetics to improve their metabolic health and well-being. I also talked about how to use some coping skills to manage some of these stressors that we encounter.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. I encourage everybody watching this on our YouTube channel at Legal Nurse Business, or going to the audio channels where you're hearing this podcast, to take to heart what Chris has to say. And then when you're finished listening to her podcast, or while you're listening to her podcast, go out for a walk. Put those earbuds in, walk around the neighborhood, listen to the podcast. I do this all the time. It prevents people from coming up and talking to me because they don't want to interrupt me when I'm listening, or I'm carrying on a phone conversation. Get your steps in and take to heart the messages that you'll hear from Chris Mew in her podcast. We'll see you there. That's it for Legal Nurse Podcast. Thanks for being here. Be sure to get your ticket for our next online conference that's taking place February 27, 28, and March 1. You can get your ticket at the link in this video if you're watching this on YouTube, or if you're listening to this, the link is lnc.tips/February 2025 virtual. Come on and join us. Get knowledge, get support, get encouragement, make new friends, all from the comfort of your home. We'll see you there.